Welcome to the geography of drugs. In this video, we're going to cover the spatial aspects of how illicit, mind-altering substances are grown, produced, distributed, and consumed around the world. We'll delve into the physical, economic, social, and political factors that influence drug patterns globally and locally. Please keep in mind that I'm not here to promote any of these substances, nor am I here to give you a moralizing don't do drugs lecture either. This video is strictly to learn about how these substances operate on a global level. Another point worth mentioning is that I'm going to focus primarily on naturally grown substances like cannabis, opium, and coke, rather than synthetic substances like meth and LSD. Natural substances are dependent on climatic and environmental factors, whereas synthetic substances are independent of the natural environment and largely are exclusively dependent on social and economic influences. So let's go over some of them. First on the list is coca, or cocaine. This is grown primarily in the Andes region. The Andes are a long mountain chain in South America, the longest mountain chain in the world. They stretch from the Caribbean waters of Colombia all the way to Argentina and Chile near Antarctica. But most of the production is in Colombia and nearby countries such as Peru, Ecuador, and Bolivia, from the coca plants, which have a psychoactive alkaloid and are mass-produced in tropical alpine climates. These plants require high temperatures. After all, they are from the jungle, high precipitation, the rainforest, and grow best at higher elevation, the Andes Mountains. This makes the Andes perfect for cultivation. If you've traveled to this region, you might be familiar with chewing coca leaves, which supposedly mitigates altitude sickness, despite the lack of evidence. These leaves on their own are harmless, but when they're purified, the substance can produce euphoria temporarily while leading to addiction in the long run. And you can also OD it given the quantities. You've also probably heard that Coca-Cola once used Coke in their recipe. This is sort of true. They did use the coca plant for flavoring during the 1800s. Today, the flavoring mostly comes from artificial vanilla extract and other flavors, but if I knew the exact recipe, I would probably have been assassinated already. Now, during the late 1800s and early 1900s, cocaine was not that highly stigmatized. It was used for medical purposes and even promoted by Sigmund Freud. Colombia has historically been the top coke producer. Most of this is exported. However, coke paste, also known as pacao, is a cheaper alternative and is popular in many Latin American nations such as Colombia and Peru. The coke paste, also known as pacao, is by and large domestically consumed. After all, coke itself in powdered form is very expensive. As a result of this, it's by and large regarded as a rich man's drug. The coke is by and large exported to North America, Europe, and elsewhere. Now, poor people in the developed world by and large tend to smoke crack, which comes from the same plant, but it's usually not snorted in powdered form. It's usually free-based using some sort of pipe or spoon. Colombian drug lords figured out that they could make a lot more money by targeting poor demographics in the developed world. In part, as a result of this, there were actually higher penalties legally on crack than there were for coke, which some have interpreted as classist and even racist, given the social fabric of the 1980s at the peak of the crack epidemic. Today, South American and Andean nations are still the major producers. These are still exported largely to North America and later Europe and the Asia-Pacific region. Today, Colombia has managed to wrest some control over the trade and develop some semblance of rule of law just in the past 15 years, something that was unthinkable a few decades ago. Moving on to the other side of the world, we get to opium. Opium and the various substances that derive from it are morphine, oxycodone, and most famously or infamously, heroin. Unlike coca, which grows in tropical environments, opium grows in cooler alpine environments with lower precipitation. Historically, the British Empire fought a few wars for drugs in the Asia Pacific region, known as the Opium Wars against China, trying to profit off of opium sales. To this day, China has some of the most draconian drug laws in the world, oftentimes dishing out death penalties over nonviolent offenses. During the mid 20th century, the major production centers were in what was known as the Golden Triangle: Myanmar, Laos, and Thailand. However, in more recent years, the primary producers have morphed into Central Asia, also known as the Golden Crescent: Afghanistan, Iran, and Pakistan. Afghanistan is the largest producer of opium and heroin, and by and large has been one of the major sources of revenue for the Taliban government. Today, Afghanistan can be considered a narco state, as its alpine environment is excellent for producing those poppies. While coke is mainly used in the developed world, heroin is very common in the developing world, as heroin is cheap. Iran, Pakistan, and Afghanistan are all developing countries with very high rates of addiction. Heroin is also exported elsewhere and has become popular with people struggling with addiction to legal painkillers, only causing ever more damage. Next on the list is less depressing: cannabis. Unlike the previous two examples, cannabis is a soft drug. It's not highly addictive or terrible for your health. The worst effects are excess coughing and the overconsumption of Doritos and maybe excessively playing Mario Kart. Cannabis is native to the Tibetan Plateau and spread into the Indian subcontinent and eventually into the Middle East, Europe, and the Americas. Artificial selection allowed the cannabis plant to grow in a variety of different climates, usually preferring large amounts of sunlight, which is why many gloomy climates are able to grow cannabis indoors. With artificial selection, there are countless strains of cannabis with all sorts of weird names, such as Purple Haze and Justin Bieber. Over the course of time, the levels of THC have increased, which is why the giant blunts smoked by hippies during the 1960s are no longer necessary today. Today, cannabis is cultivated globally, but large production by and large occurs in North America, Morocco, and Mexico. Today, Morocco is one of the biggest producers of hashish. Hashish is formed from the resin and gives a more physical high. In most other parts of the world outside of the Middle East and North Africa, the flower is most widely consumed by burning and inhaling the smoke or using it in edibles. In order to activate the THC, heat is required. Contrary to popular belief, the psychoactive THC is found primarily in the flower of the cannabis plant, not the leaves. Today, anyone in a temperate climate can grow cannabis in their backyard, and many jurisdictions have relaxed their penalties and in some cases legalized it, such as Uruguay, Canada, and most United States states. Lastly, I do want to mention that there are other synthetic drugs like meth, ecstasy, and fentanyl. These are oftentimes produced in under-the-radar labs in North America, Europe, China, and more increasingly Mexico. These are not dependent on the natural environment and probably deserve their own sort of video, as they by and large are due to economic and social factors rather than natural factors. But that is a video for another day.